Welcome, everybody. We're just going to wait 1 minute just to make sure everybody can get into the room before we get started. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mai Mixick. I'm the Early Childhood Policy Director at PCCY. I want to welcome everybody for being here today. I know that your time is very precious. Many of you are probably at your childcare centers right now. So thank you for joining us. Before we get started, just a couple of notes. The chat room is open for you to ask questions, although you may want to wait until we go through some of the main topics before you put in your questions. Thank you to everybody who submitted their questions ahead of time. That was also very helpful for us. So today we're here to talk about PPP loans, especially for childcare providers. We know that this has been a very difficult year for many of you as small business owners, but also as early childhood educators. You've been through a lot, and this is a follow-up to our webinar and conference calls that we held last year when we did the first round of PPP loans. Before I move on, I want to give our other speakers a chance to introduce themselves. Terry, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Terry Gillen, and I'm working with the team at PCCY, and I have a background in economic development, working for the city and the state.
Nicole?
Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole Westerman. Like Terry, I'm working with PCCY and honored to be here. And I've got to speak with some of you last year. So nice to see some of you again. My background is a little bit of economic development and capital program management and financial management. Thank you.
And Ian?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Lawrence. I'm the Senior Director at the Enterprise Center, where I manage and run the Capital Corporation.
Great. So before we get started, I wanted to say a couple of things. I want to emphasize today that while we are here to help you through this process as best as we can. Any advice that we provide today or any assistance we provide in follow-ups or one-on-ones with you is not a substitute for you hiring your own accountant or lawyer. Some of these processes are complex, and each of you have unique situations that may require additional help from someone who can work with you closely. So with that said, we are going to be able to offer some one-on-one consultations with you, which I will go over in more detail at the end. Very briefly, I'm just going to run through what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to talk about a broad overview of PPP loans. What are they? Who's eligible? How much can be borrowed? And then we will go into a more complex topic about PPP loan forgiveness. And I know a lot of you had questions about that. And a lot of you are wondering, especially if you took out a loan the first round, what you're supposed to do next. Then we'll go over some of the questions that were submitted to us ahead of time. And then we'll also, after that, take questions from the chat. And then Ian will come and talk about the Enterprise Center and what they can offer childcare providers as it relates to PPP loans. And then at the very end, I'm really hoping that we have time to talk about advocacy, because as somebody actually pointed out in their question to us, while you can get a loan, there's many challenges that you're facing as childcare providers right now. And some of it, you know, is stuff that happens at a policy level, and you may be wondering, what more can I do to make sure that my business and my families are served as best as they can? So we're going to talk about the latest stimulus package. We're going to talk about some childcare policies that have been going on in Pennsylvania and how it affects you and how you can step in and contact your lawmakers and let your voice be known. So that's going to be at the very end. I hope you stick around for that. And with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Terry to get us started.
I'm happy to get it started, and Nicole going to do a quick overview of the payroll protection program. Some of you know this already, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So this is a program of the Small Business Administration, the SBA. It's a forgivable loan program for small businesses. And the theory behind it, just to be clear, is that you are going to keep your business going. And so it helps to subsidize and pay the cost of you keeping your folks on the payroll during COVID. That's the theory. So the attractiveness of it is that you get some of your loan or all of it, depending on how much you borrow, forgiven. You don't have to pay it back if you meet certain criteria. And we're going to talk about what those criteria are. But the idea, again, is that you're keeping people on the payroll. And the reason I emphasize this is because last year, some of you worked with us during the COVID when it first came out, and we thought that this was only going to last a few months. And then we all had to face the reality that it was going to take a long time. And many businesses decided that they were going to let their employees go and apply for unemployment instead. So that's not what this is, to do. This is actually, if your employee, you've decided that you're staying open, you're going to try to weather through until we're out of this, and you want to keep your employees on the payroll. So that's the idea behind the PPP loan. There are other loan programs, and we can talk about it in a minute, but that's the idea behind this, is to keep your business running. Just to be clear, there are two versions of PPP, first draw and second draw. It just means first draw is your first loan from the PPP. And if you did get a payroll protection loan already, you are allowed to get a second loan, which is called the second draw. And the rules are almost identical, but we can go into that for those of you that have questions. You do apply through your bank or your lending facility or financial advisor. So there are SBA programs where you apply directly. And again, we can talk about some of those. The EIDL program is one that many of you may know. But this, you still have to go through your lender. There were a lot of problems with that last year. We can talk about the SBA trying to make that a little easier for people, but the idea is that you first go to your bank. And the reason for that is that the programs, you're not being completely underwritten anew. The idea is to go to somebody who knows your business already, and they can give you a quick thumbs up and move you quickly to where you can get the money. And that's going to happen faster if you go to somebody who understands your finances and if you go to your lender. Now, many people ran into problems with their lender not being responsive, there being a long line. And if that's the case, then Nicole and Ian and I are going to talk about other alternatives, other alternative lenders, one of which may be the Enterprise Center. And that's what Ian's going to talk about. So, but the idea again is that you have to apply for a PPP loan through your lender, not through SBA directly. What does PPP cover? It covers payroll costs. So basically salaries and benefits. And again, we can go into more detail about what it is. But Congress has also added the ability to pay for other things such as rent or mortgage, some of which you could pay for last year, but they've also added other costs like property damage, worker protection, so PPE costs, expansion of business space costs, computing costs. So there are, again, a bunch of additional costs that you can cover with the PPP loan. Again, when we talk about forgiveness, we're going to emphasize that 60% of the loan has to be payroll costs if you want to have it forgiven. So if you're thinking, you want to use it all for your mortgage or something, you won't be able to get all of that forgiven. So again, we can walk you through that, but the idea is that 60% or more of this goes to payroll, and then 40% can go to these other expenses. How much can you ask for? Again, it's similar to the rules from last year, which many of you are familiar with, which is basically 2.5 times your monthly expenses. So, and we can go through the calculations if people have questions about it, but the basic idea is that you come up with your annual costs, which is your annual payroll, including benefits. You divide that by 12 to get your monthly payroll, and then multiply that by 2.5. And that's how much you're allowed to request in the loan amount. So you're going to need to document all of that with your payroll reports, certain tax IRS forms, and other ways to document that so the bank or the financial institution knows that you're telling the truth, because that's really what they want to verify, is that you're telling the truth. So I would just stop there, have Nicole and Ian weigh in on anything we've missed, and then we can go into the issue of how to apply for forgiveness, because many people gave us questions and some of you have already gotten loans and you want to know what the forgiveness process is. But I'm just going to stop there and ask Nicole and Ian to jump in on anything.
Thanks, Terry. I think that was a really great overview. One thing I just wanted to add is, and many of you already know this, but many lenders, or maybe most lenders, are accepting applications online through their own customized portal. But it's a great idea to look at the documents, the SBA documents, because each lender's application is only going to ask you for stuff that the SBA already asks for. So if you look at the SBA documentation, you'll be well prepared for your lender's application form. And PCCY has, hopefully you all saw in the email, but PCCY has put on their website kind of a resource page with documentation of, I think of it as kind of 3 areas that we're talking about. So there's the first draw PPP, there's the second draw PPP, and then there's PPP forgiveness. And they each have their own application forms. They each have their own governmental rules. And I think they all have their own frequently asked questions and some supplementary information. One other thing to just keep in mind is that the SBA keeps tweaking things and adding on to the frequently asked questions. So the information that is on PCCY's website is as of 3 days ago, all current, but and we'll try to keep that up to date, but never hurts to go directly to the SBA website and check there for updates. Ian, do you want to add in before we move on to forgiveness?
Sure.
Ian, I think you're muted.
Just share my screen real quickly. I just wanted to go over a couple of the slides that I did have, just to add some additional context to what was said earlier. I think I saw a message in the chat where someone was asking about size, and here are the size requirements. Essentially, for first round, you can't have more than 500 employees, and second round, no more than 300 employees. There is that revenue reduction that you need to show for second round PPP loans, but that 25% reduction in revenue over a quarter can also be looked at on an annual basis as well. But you only have to show this reduction if you're applying for a loan greater than $150,000. So if you're $150,000 or less, you simply have to attest to the fact that you did have a reduction quarter to quarter with the loan, with your business. And also the maximum loan amount is still $10 million for first draw as well, but $2 million for second draw. And in terms of the tax treatment, I think a lot of people have questions around this. Any business, the loan is non-taxable. I think that was some guidance that came out with this recent round of legislation. And also the expenses that you do take are tax deductible. So I think that's from this page. I'm just gonna run over here real quick. One of the things that individuals are getting hung up on is that you can't have compensation above $100,000. If an employee is being compensated above $100,000, you cannot include that in the payroll number. You have to exclude that. And I believe Terry mentioned this earlier, some of the covered costs, payroll. And payroll is viewed very expansively. It includes group benefits, it includes 401k contribution. So it's a number of costs that is considered on the payroll. So sort of think of it as all the fringe benefits that you would get in addition to your salary. On the second draw loans, and I don't think this applied to this group, but if you were any food services or accommodations, you do get a slight bump in terms of your maximum loan amount. You do get 3.5 versus 2.5. And I think that's, and like Terry mentioned, the application is very simple. Most lenders are going to have you come through their portal. We're doing the same thing as well at the Enterprise Center, but it does make sense to be familiar with the application itself. And I did see that in the resource package for this webinar. So take a look at it. We're going to ask similar questions as well. One thing I didn't sort of cover was for first round applicants, you can refinance your idle loan if you had it between January and March, I believe, of last year. You could include that as part of your first round application, but not your second. And lastly, let me see one more thing. And lastly, you do want to make sure that you have all your documentation ready to send to your lender. It's always best to send to the lender that you used before for your first round if you're going to second round, because the SBA has sort of put guidance out that said they can use the tax documents that you use prior on the first round and simply just approve you essentially going forward. An additional guidance that we did get was individuals wanted to know whether or not they can apply for the first and the second round essentially at the same time. And we're still getting verification of this, but the SBA seemed to indicate that you can apply for both first and second round at essentially the same time. What they're saying to the lenders is that the lenders need to hold on to the second round funds until you have expended all the first round funds. We're still getting clarification on that, but that's kind of the guidance we have had. And I believe that happened 2 days ago. So I'll leave it there.
I have just a couple minor additions. One is I remembered we should probably just say that the application deadline for both the first draw and the second draw PPP is March 31st. So plenty of time. Again, these are pretty simple. I know they may not look simple, but they're pretty simple applications. You have plenty of time. Probably good to, though, work on them sooner rather than later, since last year there was so much demand with the first draw PPP that it's just good to get in while you can. And then I thought I would just maybe provide an example of, or an illustration of what Ian was talking about with the $100,000 limit. So that's on a per employee basis. So let's say we're Ian and Terry and I work together in an organization, and Ian makes $110,000 and Terry and I make $50,000. So that portion, that 10,000 above 100,000 that Ian earns per year would not get counted on that on a prorated basis. So 100% of Terry's and my salary would be counted, but just that portion of Ian's over what would end up being over $100,000 for a year would not be counted for Ian. So hopefully I didn't make that more confusing. But
no, that was clear. And the other question that we got last year, but we didn't get it today, but I imagine we will, is how do we treat part-time people when we're counting FTEs?
Well, it's not really based on FTEs, it's your total payroll cost. So right. If you take all your employees' costs, what the issue may be when they do ask you for your FTEs And I imagine you could count it simply as one FTE, a half FTE is two half FTEs would be one.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And just saw a question in the chat about the calculation of the loan amount. It's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. So we'll look at, most people will look at all of 2019 or all of 2020, what's total payroll divided by 12 to get your average monthly payroll, and then multiply that by 2.5. And it's very clear on the application.
And
We're basically getting 2.5 months of loan.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I could share my screen real quick again, just to, I have an example of that where, hold on 1 second. So here's the formula. Essentially, your total payroll, you're going to divide by 12 and multiply by whatever factor you're using. And if it's the first round, you could add the idle. An example here is for someone who's self-employed with no employees. What you would do is you would look at your Schedule C, line 31, which is your net profit line. If that is negative, you're not eligible. If it's positive, in this case, it's 75,000. You're going to take that divided by 12. You'll get 6250, and then you multiply that by 2.5. And so your loan amount is going to be 15,625. In this case, the person didn't have an idle loan. Hope that's clear.
Yeah, thank you. And just so people who don't know what an idle loan is, that's the SBA loan program. It's not forgivable, but it's still a very attractive program. So if for some reason the PPP loan doesn't make sense for you, or even if it does, you may want to go and look at the EIDL idle loan. That is, you can apply directly to the SBA. And you can use it for a whole bunch of things, any kind of working capital needs, including payroll. And it's a very low interest for nonprofits. It's 2.75%. And frankly, it's over 30 years. So your monthly payments are really low. And you may be able to defer any payment for at least for the next 12 months. So if for some reason the payroll protection loan doesn't work for you, or even if it does, it's worth looking at idle. You cannot use idle and PPP for the same expense at the same time. So you can't double dip, but you can use them for the same thing at different times. Oh, and last year there was a $10,000 upfront sort of grant. That doesn't, I think they took that away, right, guys? I think that doesn't exist now. Yeah, so no more advances. So do somebody want to talk about forgiveness? And the easy form is form 3508S. That's the simplified forgiveness form. What's the timing of that, and what's the process to apply for forgiveness?
Ian, do you want to? Okay.
Yeah, sure. You can apply for forgiveness anytime within your covered period. And the client can choose the covered period in this go around. And you can apply for 100% forgiveness for the loan, as long as you have used 60% to cover payroll. You can use more than 60% to cover payroll, but you have to use at least 60%. That includes, like I mentioned earlier, the group insurance, the vision, the dental, disability, and life insurance. And the remaining 40% of the loan you can use for, and you can allocate it to other allowable expenses during the covered period, which also includes mortgage, rent, utilities, other debt interest, operation expenses such as software, any worker protection, equipment that you have to purchase. If your property was damaged during the unrest recently, you can also include that as part of the allowable costs. One caveat though is that if you have greater than 40% in non-payroll costs, then your reduction, your forgiveness will be reduced. Or if you reduce headcount or you reduce salaries greater than 25%. There are some exceptions to that. Like Terry mentioned, there are 3 different type of forgiveness form. The first one, the 3008S, is the simplest form you can use. Is really simple. As long as you have a loan that's $50,000 or less, and you are exempt from any reduction based on FTEs or reduction in salaries. So most people are going to fall into this category. So you want to go ahead and use that particular form. For those businesses that did have that didn't reduce salaries more than 25%, or employees, they can use the easy form, which is the 3508 easy, and you can use that as a sole proprietor, for example. The last form is for anyone who can't use the first 2 forms. You have to use this long form, which is definitely more expansive and more complicated to use. I include the links down here, but I believe the resource guide does include the actual forms themselves. So you can take a look at those there. So what documents are you going to need to submit for forgiveness? You're going to have to submit your payroll costs, and that could be from a third-party processor, any financial documents you have or filings, your tax documents, any receipts, cancel checks, or account statement that kind of show the contributions you have to your payroll costs. And as it relates to the other allowable costs, utility bills, any purchase orders for PPE that you had, cancel checks related to those expenses will suffice. And you just send those in to your lender. You do want to send your application into the lender who originated the loan. A lot of lenders are not doing forgiveness for loans that they did not originate. Anyone else want to add additional information?
One thing, Ian, do you have have you heard anything about the use of the safe harbor provisions in the forgiveness application?
I have heard about it. Most of our clients don't need to invoke it at all, because it's clear that they are going to get full forgiveness. One thing I didn't include here was for the loans over $150,000, you do have to demonstrate on second round applications that 50%, that 25% drop quarter over quarter. You do have to send that in at that point. For those under $150,000, you do not have, you just have, I think it's an attestation just saying that you did. And because many small businesses don't produce quarterly financials, we will take an annual year-over-year drop of 25%.
And I did just want to add, my understanding is that the forgiveness application must be submitted within 10 months of the end of the covered period of your PPP application. So for example, I'm working with an organization that their covered period ended in the beginning of October 2020. And so their forgiveness application is going to be due in August at the latest, but we can submit it anytime before then.
Otherwise, you would have to start paying interest on the loan, and I don't think anyone wants to do that. So make sure you submit your application as soon as you're able to demonstrate that you have expended the funds and you can provide documentation. You should go ahead and ask for forgiveness. We have had a number of our own clients submit their application recently, and the SBA fully forgave them.
And if somebody submits their forgiveness application, but the lending institution doesn't do anything with it, are they still okay if they've just submitted it?
They have the SBA has provided guidelines around how long you can wait to do it. So they do have a timeline to submit it to the SBA, and I believe the SBA have 90 days to approve the request.
Okay.
This is Maya. Can I ask a question? Because we have gotten, this is actually not from any of the submitted questions or the chat, But prior to this, I've had discussions with providers who've said that they have gone to their lender and their lender isn't taking forgiveness applications yet. And so their question is, what are they supposed to do? Do you have any advice on that?
I think just hold tight. You can go ahead and apply for the second draw PPP if you qualify. So go ahead and apply. Don't worry about forgiveness, and just apply for forgiveness when your lender is accepting the applications.
Great. Do we want to move on to Q&A? Great.
Sure.
So the Q&As, I've organized them based on questions about applying for PPP loans, and then forgiveness, and then very specific questions related to kind of more individual situations. So we'll see if we get time to get to those questions. But I definitely want to just start with more broad questions. And I think we've already answered a lot of them, like, you know, what counts as a small business? Somebody asked if like their nonprofit if they're nonprofit versus for-profit, does that matter?
Does not matter.
Yep, so you can be either nonprofit or for-profit. Great. Let's see here. Are there any grants available as opposed to loans, or are loans really the only resource that's out there right now?
I don't know of any grants, but a forgivable loan is essentially a grant. So people should understand, if they meet the requirements of forgiveness here, you're essentially, under PPP, you're essentially getting a grant.
Mm-hmm.
They don't call it that, but that really is what it is.
The next question is, when will the new funds be available?
They're available,
right now.
yeah,
Now.
January 11th.
Yeah, so now. I think you answered this question already, but I just want to ask it so you can, you know, there's a clear answer. If they don't have employees and are self-employed, are they eligible?
Yes.
Just need to provide a Schedule C, and that line 31 needs to be positive. But yes, they can.
Okay. There's a little confusion about this. I know you talked about it, but the first draw versus second draw has to do with whether or not you're taking out one loan versus two loans, not necessarily if you applied in the back in 2020 versus now. So could they theoretically apply for two loans in 2021?
No. So the first draw is really available for those who missed the first draw previously. And the second draw is for those who already have a PPP loan from before, and just this is the second draw. The only guidance we've gotten is for those people who didn't get a first draw at all, they can now apply for a first draw now and a second draw as well.
Okay.
I hope that clears it up.
Yeah, there were at least 3 questions about, if I did it last year, can I do it now, or can I do 2 right now? So, okay.
I'm sorry, just to be clear. So you can only have one first draw PPP and one second draw PPP.
Yes. Great.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
You can't have 3.
The next question is, are all financial institutions supposed to allow borrowers to use money for more than one area of assistance? I know this was also answered, but it's always good to repeat information. I'm asking, can the loan be used for mortgage payment and payroll and utilities, or just one thing?
Yeah, you can use them for all of those different things, but to be forgiven, you need to use at least 60% on payroll costs.
Great.
So a maximum of 40% on those other things.
The next question is, which banks will assist? This person has contacted 5 banks and reviewed the SBA website and is a little lost about where to go.
Well, all of the banks are supposed to be doing this. As we know, some of them are doing a better job than others. One good piece of news is that the Enterprise Center is a certified financial institution, community development financial institution. And so if you go to your bank and your bank's not doing these loans or not responsive, you can apply through the Enterprise Center. And Ian is gonna tell us a little bit more about how people would do that.
Great.
I'm gonna drop in the chat the link to our landing page for PPP loans, first draw and second draw. So I'll do that.
Okay. So a couple of kind of specific questions. What tax year is used for the application?
You can use either 2019 or 2020.
2020. And then if there
what we give, the guidance we give to clients is that look at both years in terms of payroll costs and choose the higher one because you'll get a larger loan amount.
That's helpful. Another person asked, how do they identify the loan number from the original PPP? I assume that is in their paperwork that they submitted.
It should be. And what we've been seeing is some clients have been mistaken that for their lender number, but you do need to have your previous number because right now the SBA made a number of changes in terms of the approval process. So we're getting some kickbacks. They're actually doing a lot of due diligence on these loans this go around in terms of checking whether or not the EIN matches with the business, checking whether or not there's any bankruptcies, checking whether or not you have any convictions. So they're doing a lot more checking. So we're getting a lot of declines related to felony convictions. And those are second draw loans. So clearly they went through last year. And so make sure you have your lender number, your SBA number, and make sure you have the amount. Because if it doesn't match, it will also kick back out as well.
Great. So there are two questions that are kind of related, so I'm going to ask them together. Someone asked, can you please explain a little more about which average monthly payroll cost should be used for the second draw, 2019 versus 2020? And then somebody had asked about whether or not you could go through your example again, but with somebody who has employees.
The first question, can you repeat the first question?
Sure. So they asked which average monthly payroll cost should be used for the second draw, 2019 or 2020?
You could use either one. You could use 2019 or 2020.
Okay. And then can you go through the example in your slide where you had the person making 75,000 in profit, but they want to see an example with employees? Would that be possible right now?
It's exactly the same formula. It is really let me show this. I could show this particular slide. This will be helpful. Not sure everyone can see that. So here's basically the formula based on entity type and whether or not you have employees or not. So if you are, this is the example I did, which was without employees, you simply look at line 31. But if you had employees, you will also look at line 31. And if it's negative, this is the only time when it's negative that you can go on to the next step is if you have employees. So if this is negative, the line 31, you simply zero it out, and then you take your 941s, your quarterly 941s, and you essentially take line 5C, column 1, and you add those up for all 4 quarters. Then you can add in your employer contribution for your health, and also your contribution for retirement and any state or local assessment for compensation. You could do that. We are not seeing a lot of people add in the state related number. Most people have the Schedule C and they have the 941s, and they're just using these two numbers. Some people are also using the health and other related fringe benefits, but it's the same math. You just use, this is going to be your total in terms of payroll costs. And it's different for different entity types. So if you are a nonprofit, for example, you're not going to look at schedule. You're not going to have a Schedule C. You're simply going to use your 941s to figure out what your total payroll cost is.
Great. I think you answered one of the, I think I saw twice, somebody asked what to do if they have a negative on that Schedule C line 31. So it sounds like you're saying it's okay if you have employees because you just move on to the next step.
And I could share this with you so you can distribute it to your group.
Sure, we'll make sure to put it up on our website. We also kind of touched on this topic, but always good to revisit it. So the 300 staff limit, is that including full-time and part-time? How is the 300 calculated?
It is, I view it as FTEs, and it includes any affiliate business as well. So if you have joint ownership in multiple businesses, you have to actually apply that test to all the businesses that have joint ownership.
Okay. Let's see our next question. After my first PPP draw was exhausted, I applied and received the SBA EIDL loan. Can you participate in the second PPP draw if you have not exhausted all of your, is it EIDL? Am I pronouncing that right? EIDL loan?
I don't, but
I
whatever.
know.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, again, I just want to emphasize, make sure you're not applying for the same thing if you want your PPP to be forgiven. I mean, they need to be, not paying for the same expense.
Mhm. The next question is, how long do you have to expend the funds?
Oh, I don't know that.
You can choose your covered period between 8 and 24 weeks. So the borrower gets to choose that. So most people will choose the longer one so they have more time to demonstrate they have spent the money. But if you have a lot of expenses and you can demonstrate that you can show those expenses within 8 weeks, that's fine too. But you get to choose. And after your covered period, you have a 10-month deferral on payments.
Okay. The next question is, we are a part year program, so we stop payroll in May. Do I have enough time to apply now and get the money in time to cover payroll from February through May?
That's a unique case. It does have provisions for seasonal businesses, so we would have to look at that on a special case basis. But I don't see why you couldn't.
We have a couple of questions related to applying multiple times. So if they applied and did not receive a PPP loan from a bank, are they allowed to apply to other banks? Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
They should do that.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, can I just interrupt for 1 second? Ian, are you able to share any information about organizations who have applied for the PPP through you and whether they have been approved and received money, like how fast that goes, or what's kind of the average time period?
So we opened our portal the first week we were allowed to do so in January, and it is taking some time to go through the underwriting because there's like a crush of application. But we just did our first funding on Monday, and we funded 172 businesses, about $3 million. And then on Tuesday, we did another 39 for $500,000. And we have today, we just got another batch to process. It's about 179 for about 3.5 million. So we're getting it through, but we do ask for patience from clients. But once we get it, we'll underwrite it. We send it over to the SBA. That process is taking a little bit longer because the SBA does have to review them now. Last time, they were actually instantly approving them. They're not doing that this time. They have up to like 72 hours to approve the new loans now.
But it sounds like only a couple of weeks still.
Yeah,
per year.
it's only a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And the great thing is that CDFIs and other community-based lenders have a special carve out from the law that allows us we'll have funds available after the general fund is run out.
Great.
So, and people can go to you even if they don't want to go to their bank, right?
Yeah, we actually have several people who just decided they didn't want to work with their bank. It was too onerous. So they came to us. One in particular, we actually have a nationwide charter to do PPP loans. So we've been doing loans as far as California and Texas. And I just did one in Maryland, and she had gone through her bank and she just didn't want to go through her bank again. And we just funded her on that Monday batch for like 600,000 in payroll. So it was great.
There's a related question, so I'm going to ask it. Is there a particular criteria that the Enterprise Center looks for in who you lend to?
No, we generally work with low to moderate income individuals. Typically, the clients we work with can't get funding through a bank. So that's typically our clients. As it relates to PPP, anyone who sends in an application, we will review it. In many cases, we will follow up back with you if we actually have to confirm the calculations. And if we see that your number is too low, we'll let you know that and tell you, hey, you really should get more than what you're asking for, and we'll put it through at the higher limit. So we've had several of those where people are getting much more than they actually asked for.
Sure. And I think when we get to your section about what is the enterprise doing right now, you can probably elaborate even more on that. Okay, a question from Delilah Brennan. I had a reduce in a quarter for 2020, but it was not 25%. Can I apply for the second draw? I'm not sure what that's referring to.
In one quarter that she had a decrease in.
Mm-hmm.
What about on an annual basis? Have her look at it on an annual basis if it's 25% there, because if it's below $150,000, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
So look at each quarter and then look at the year as a whole and see if you can identify a 25% drop on any of those bases.
So we haven't even gotten to the questions that are primarily about forgiveness yet, but I do want to make sure we cover kind of these questions about just applying in general. So someone asks, if you apply for PPP in the first round of payroll, on the second round, do you have to be covering something else, or is it covering the same information, the same people, the same costs?
Same people, same costs. There, as Terry and Ian said, there are some additional costs that can be covered now, but it has to be for a different period of time.
Okay.
So your covered period is going to be a different period of time.
Let's move on to, because we do have a lot of questions about forgiveness. Let's move on to those questions, and if we have time, we can go back to these more broader questions.
Good.
So to qualify for forgiveness, a PPP loan already received, when is the paperwork due to the lender?
So that's the 10 months after the end of your covered period.
Right. So if their covered period is like 5 months, then 10 months from that 5 months.
Yeah, Yeah, it doesn't matter how long the covered period is. It's
Mhm.
just within 10 months of that, they should apply, but they can apply sooner. So as soon as the covered period is over, you can get your forgiveness application in.
Can you apply for more than one PPP loan and receive forgiveness on both?
Yes.
So under what conditions will they have to pay back the loan? So that's basically like, under what conditions would a loan not be forgiven, I think is what they're asking.
So there are a few different conditions, and it's not all or nothing. So what happens is that they may require you to pay back a portion of your loan, but not the whole thing. So conditions that would make your loan not completely forgivable. So if you don't use at least 60% of your loan proceeds on payroll costs, then they're going to reduce the forgiven amount. If you reduce the amount that you're paying your people from what they used to be paid, they're going to reduce the forgiveness amount. If you reduce the number of people that you have on payroll, they're also going to reduce your forgiveness amount. And so the application has you enter information, and then if you're not getting 100% forgiveness, then it basically calculates a ratio, the portion of your loan that's going to be forgiven.
Sorry, these questions are a little bit more broader, but can employees who are on a 1099 and a W-2 be covered?
Just W-2 employees.
Oh, you got really quiet, Ian. Can you, your sound?
Just W-2
There you go.
employees, not 1099s. 1099s can apply for themselves.
Yeah, they can apply on their own.
Okay. So I think this is actually a very, I know that it can be confusing. So to go back to the FTE calculation again, somebody says they have 5 employees, including herself, who work 40 hours a week, and 4 employees who work 30 to 35 hours a week. How is FTE calculated? Oh, you are on mute, Ian.
So if she's asking about how do you calculate the payroll is going to be independent of the FTEs. So what you want to do is you can say you can just prorate it like the FTEs. If they work half time, 2 half times equal 1. Sort of think about it that way.
But the loan amount is based on her payroll costs. So
Payroll.
it doesn't matter if they're part-time or full-time. It's just what's the amount of the payroll.
But the application requires them to enter the number of employees. So my understanding of that is that, so in the example that the person gave, I think she said there are 5 people working 40 hours a week. So there are 5. And then for the others who are working less than 40 hours a week, you would add up those hours and divide by 40 to get the number of full-time equivalents. And is Terry and Ian, is that your understanding?
Yeah, basically that's what you said it much better than I was saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we are getting a lot of questions now about very specific circumstances. So someone just asked about being self-employed and how much her loan is. And I think Stephen's answering some of the questions in the chat, but we are offering 30-minute consultations with either Terry or Nicole specific to applying for loans. And at the end of this session, I'm going to drop a link in the chat and you can go and sign up for a half-hour session with Nicole or Terry. Like Ian also will have his email address and he had given you the link in the chat. We can give it again for if you want to apply through the Enterprise Center, how do you do that? And then I was going to mention later, but I'll just mention it now. today we wanted Jeff Campbellango to join us. He is an attorney who does employment law. He's not able to be with us today, but I will also drop a link for you to sign up and get a 30-minute consultation with him, because he covers topics that we're not going to be able to get to today. So he covers things related to unemployment law, or employment law, paid sick leave, family leave, and he'll even talk about some tax situations as well, but he's not able to be here. We'll drop that link at the end of today's session as well.
Mike, can I just add, one of the documents that is on the PCC website, that resource page, is called PPP, How to Calculate Maximum Loan Amounts for First Draw PPP Loans. And for the question that you got about the person who's self-employed, that document goes through a whole bunch of different scenarios of sort of self-employed people, people who need to pay themselves and employees, people who just have employed. There are a whole bunch of different scenarios. So that document may be helpful for people dealing with their own unique circumstances.
Mm-hmm. So back to the forgiveness. A lot of the questions we've got are along the lines of, how do I even get started? So what is really the first step towards forgiveness? Is it looking at the paperwork? Is it talking to your lender? What's the very first thing they should be doing?
Yeah, so I would say you want to try to pull together what you spent, right? So the core is, what did you spend on payroll during your covered period? So you can pull together like your payroll stubs. If you use ADP, you can just run a report. Pull together how much you spent on payroll. You want to pull together everything that you spent on other stuff. So if you paid for gas and water and electric, pull those bills together. If you had mortgage payments, pull them together. You're going to need to submit copies of the invoices or cancel checks eventually. So kind of make a big pile or a big file of all of that paperwork. And the forgiveness application, I mean, I can share my screen if you want to, but basically you're going to enter amounts, those amounts that you spent on payroll, on utilities, other costs, and then you're going to answer questions about whether about your head count and about how much you paid, because remember, they're going to reduce your forgiveness if you're paying people less than you used to pay them, or if you have fewer people on your payroll. So that's the way to start, though, is just collect the information on what you spent.
Great. Good advice. Let me look at the questions here.
I'll just add, actually, too, I know I'm familiar with the more complicated version of the forgiveness application, and it looks like a lot, it feels like a lot, but again, you shouldn't have to hurry. You should have plenty of time. You should have months to turn this in, actually, so you can take your time and just do one little piece at a time. And again, feel free to sign up for time with Terry and me to help out. But it's like, it looks really complicated, but if you can just kind of slog through, it's not as bad as it looks.
That's great. People can continue to submit their questions. We'll come back to Q&A, but I want to give Ian a chance to talk a little bit more about the Enterprise Center. What are they doing to process these loans? Who's typically applying? What the process is like? So Ian, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I just dropped in the chat not too long ago a link to the main landing page to apply. And so once you get there, we have a number of resources there that you can pull up. You can actually pull the application itself. There's a document list that you can look at what we expected you to submit to us. And also, if you need to have a conversation, you can also sign up for office hours as well to have a conversation with someone. But once you click on the link, you will go to another portal, which where you type in all your information. You don't actually have to send in the paper form. We do encourage it, but if you don't want to, that's fine. And once you have submitted, it goes into a processor queue who will then look at your application, make sure that it has all the sufficient documents to make the underwriting decision. And if it does, we go ahead and do the calculations just to double check your work. And if it matches up, then we go ahead and submit it to the SBA. And within a few days, you will get a DocuSign promissory note, which you will sign. And because we ask you to include a cancel check or voided check, we will then wire the funds directly to your account after we get the promissory note and in one of our funding batches. So it is taking time to go through. There's a crush of applications. We have a staff that's about 10 or so that's working through the backlog, but we are getting to all the applications. And if there's an issue, we'll let you know. We are running into some issues. For example, the biggest issue we're running into is clients. Their first loan was submitted under an EIN or a business name, and it's not matching up with the new application, and so the SBA is not accepting those. So we have run into those. We run into situations where some people have actually applied elsewhere, and it tells you no, they have applied elsewhere. So we'll run into situations like that as well. So, but it's a straightforward process. Like I mentioned, we're basically have funded over 7 million so far in loan requests for over 300 businesses.
Great. So at this time, we're going to share the links to the consultation sessions. Stephen is going to put the link first for Terry and Nicole. And Terry and Nicole, are you gonna, you can talk a little bit more about what you can and can't help them with, but they're gonna really focus on applying for the PPP loan. So the forgiveness part is really kind of a separate category of help. So just keep that in mind when you apply. Terry and Nicole, you wanna talk about specifically the things you'll cover in the 30-minute consultation?
I think we also can give people guidance on forgiveness. We're happy to do that as well. So
Okay.
it'll just be, again, answering sort of these general questions and doing what Nicole just did, which is guiding people to many of the SBA forms will answer people's questions. And a lot of times we just have to point that out to folks. So when it starts to get into really detailed numbers, we are going to say to people, you might need an accountant or whoever does your taxes might have to help answer some of these questions. We're not accountants, so we're not going to give tax advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really key, is that a lot of times you will need an accountant or maybe even a lawyer. Okay. Well, I'll take some more questions since we have the time. So someone said, if you don't expend all the funds but still spend 60% of what you spent 60% on payroll, will you need to repay all of the funds or only a portion of what you did not spend? So what happens if you don't spend all the money?
You would just repay the portion that you did not spend.
Okay. Let's see here.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm just realizing that I may have misunderstood the question. So if you didn't spend all the money, you would want to give back the portion that you didn't spend, and then you would do a forgiveness application to try to have what you spent be forgiven. And it sounds like you may, in your circumstances, you may well qualify for full forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
All right. Someone said, I am self-employed and have a childcare group. A lot of my parents are not working and I just have a lot of kids. I don't have employees. I need to know if I'm qualified for forgiveness and a second round of loan. my first loan was 330,000. I think that the person is kind of capturing this feeling of trepidation of applying for a second round if you're not sure you're eligible for forgiveness. I think that's really understandable, given that if you're not eligible for forgiveness, you're on the hook for this money. So do you have any advice to give for her?
Well, I think Anne did a good job before of sort of going through for somebody who is self-employed, how the application works. Important to keep in mind for the second draw PPP that you also need to demonstrate that 25% revenue drop, either on the same quarter of 2019 and 2020, or for the whole year, 2019 and 2020.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the question is also, my question is, do we know typically how many of these loans are getting forgiven on average? Are pretty much all of them getting forgiven, or are people actually getting kicked back for not meeting that 60% payroll requirement? Do you know that?
I mean, for the ones that we have, they all have been forgiven, but you simply have to show that you have expended the money 60% towards payroll costs. Once you have done that, you will get the loan forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be able to demonstrate that, though. So if you haven't used the funds for the allowable expenses, then that may become an issue.
Mm-hmm. Maxine Cassidy has a pretty straightforward question. What is the minimum amount you can apply for a loan?
Some banks have minimums, and we did hear recently that the SBA has a $1,000 minimum, but we actually put through a loan for $124. So,
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so there's a little, let's see if I want to check the Q&A to make sure I'm not missing any big questions. Some of these questions, if I didn't answer your question, it's because it might be better for you to sign up for the 30-minute consultation with Terry or Nicole, or even reach out to Ian, because they're very specific questions to your unique circumstance. And I'm not sure we can really answer them today in the time that we have, and also make it beneficial for other people. So please keep in mind, I'm not trying to ignore people or their questions. It's just in some cases, it's really better for you to sign up for the 30 minutes so that you can get the answer that you need. So with that said, continue to ask questions. I want to make sure we have a little time to talk about child care policy and advocacy. There's a lot going on right now at the federal level. Most recently, there was a stimulus package that was pushed through at the end of 2020, which is going to bring about $302 million to Pennsylvania. And that's a lot of money. It's more than what is typically spent in a year on childcare. We're not sure yet how much of that money is going to trickle down into the Southeast or into Philly specifically. But there is the money there, and policymakers are going to be looking at how to spend that money. We don't know how exactly they're going to spend it yet, but there are a number of things that we know you're struggling with right now that if you wanted to, you could write a letter to your lawmaker. You could make your struggles known so that they know what you're going through. So one example is that recently the state decided to give $600 in pandemic relief to all childcare employees, regardless of STAR status or time or length of working there. And you were supposed to, your employer, the childcare provider, was supposed to apply through your ELRC for this. We've heard that money, is there, but there's a wait list. So we're aware that's going on right now. Certainly the $302 million is there to possibly even cover that cost. We also heard this year that the education retention stipend that is typically given to people with credentials working in childcare centers. That also is not available, and we are hopeful that the $302 million that came down from the federal stimulus package can help reinstate that. But this is all to say that you have a voice in all of this, that you can write a letter to your lawmakers and let them know that you want the ERAs reinstated. Let them know that you want your $600 pandemic relief check, and that you really need relief now, and that money should be spent now as opposed to being used for other purposes, plugging budget holes or the like. So oops. Okay, I was just wanting to make sure people put the link in. So Stephen just put a link in the chat. It's going to take you to a website where you can write a letter to your lawmaker. I'm just going to share my screen right now so that you can see what the letter looks like. All right, great. So if you go to the link, you can put in your street address and use, you can use your home address or your address for your childcare center, either one, because you're trying to get to the person that represents you. If you put in your address, so I'm going to put in 990 Spring Garden Street. It's going to give me who all my lawmakers are. So my president is Joe Biden, my senator is Bob Casey and Pat Toomey, and then down here, Shapiro is the attorney general, Nikhil Savat is my senator, my state senator, and I can reach out to them using the more. Well, that's going to give them that information. That's going to tell you who it's going to send to. And the letter, I just want to show you what the letter looks like. And here's the action alert. So you would put in your information, your name, your contact information, employer could be your childcare center. And here is a letter that we have pre-written for you. And you can go in and edit this letter. You can put in right here, the name of your childcare center. You can put in the number of children that you currently serve or have the capacity to serve. And then you can even put in, sentences exactly about what you've been struggling with, maybe low enrollment. Somebody wrote to us and said, these loans are great, but I don't have a lot of kids. How am I supposed to make it through? So this is an opportunity for you to really make your voice known. And then you would hit next and it will automatically send that letter to your representatives. So we hope you use this as an opportunity to really make your voice known. The money is there from the latest stimulus package. We know that there's possibly more money coming down the pipeline. President Biden has a very ambitious $40 billion plan for childcare and early child education. I mean, obviously we don't know what that's going to look like once it makes its way through the House and the Senate. But, there is some help on the horizon, but, we have to do our part and make sure that our representatives know that this money is really needed right now and that it needs to come to us in a way that's actually going to be useful, not just paying for ERAs and the pandemic relief, but also helping you get PPE, helping you, if you're a subsidy care provider, going back to paying pre-pandemic rates so that you can meet your expenses. There's a number of ways that we know this money could really make a difference to you. Okay, so I'm gonna stop my share. And the links are in the chat box. And we have a few more questions. So I'm just gonna, we have the time, so we'll just try to answer these. Stephen, can you drop the link again for the signing up for the session? Someone said that they missed it. I know there's a lot going on in the chat box. There you go, great. Somebody asked a question, is PA Cares grant part of the PPP? No. Someone's shaking their head. Do you guys want to answer that?
No, they're two different things.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the question means.
Well, I think We could talk a little bit about where this money is coming from for these loans or these grants, right? Because that was originally came out of the CARES Act.
I don't know.
No?
believe it did. I believe it did. But the PA grants is on the state level, and PPP is federal. Right. Well, do you guys, let's we can close out for the day. We've covered everything and I don't see any additional new questions that we haven't already answered. Is there any last things you want people to know?
The only thing I would say again is just so people are clear, if they don't know what their situation is or they are not sure whether they want to apply, Nicole and I will try to help them figure that out. If people know they want to apply for a PPP loan and they want to do it through the Enterprise Center, they should just go directly to Ian and get in line to put an application in. They don't have to go through us. If you know you want to request a loan through the Enterprise Center, just set up an appointment and start that process.
Great.
I'll definitely echo what Terry just said. Do not self-select whether or not you can get a loan. Last year, there was a number of people who decided that they were not going to apply for PPP, but once we encouraged them to do so, they actually qualified, and they didn't think they qualified. So don't decide on your own whether or not you qualify or not. Speak to Nicole, speak to Terry, speak to us, and we'll let you know.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to drop my email in the chat right now too. I am happy to direct you to the right person if you're not sure. Let's say you know, if all of the consultation sessions with Terry and Nicole are taken, or you know, there's a question they can't answer. If you send me the question, I'll make sure that it gets to somebody who can answer it, hopefully. We have one more question. Is any of the EIDL grant? She was originally told it was a grant and does not need to be paid back, and now she's hearing differently.
So
No,
early,
it's a loan. Last year you could get 10,000 up front. That was a grant, but that's no longer part of it. Now, well, I did read somewhere, one of these guys may correct me, is that if you have an EIDL loan application still pending, you can get that 10,000 grant maybe still as part of the EIDL. But I think that basically you're out of luck. The EIDL is basically just a loan program now. I don't know, Nicole or Ian, whether you have a different view.
that's my understanding also.
Right. It's a loan program, but a very attractive loan. It's over 30 years. So it's worth doing the calculations.
Somebody just asked if there's, yes, so this webinar was recorded. We will put up a video. You'll be able to watch it on our website. It will be on YouTube, and you should be able to watch the entirety of it once we put it out. Anything else you want to, Nicole, was there anything else you wanted to say before we say goodbye to people?
I don't think so, except, try not to be intimidated by the programs. We can help you get through it. Ian can help you get through it, and good luck. We know that it's hard times. So we wish you the best.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I know we covered a lot of topics, and like Nicole, Terry, and Ian have said, some of it can be intimidating, some of it can be confusing. That's why we're offering you a 30-minute consultation. And like and I did mention again that Jeff Capolango, who is an attorney, is also available for 30 minutes. If you have questions about paid leave, sick leave, COVID-related employment issues, he is there for you as well. That's it. Thank you for joining us. And Stephen will answer the question about when the recording will be available. It should be up probably later today or at the very latest tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.